Hey everybody, I'm Aaron Dill, Vokey Wedge rep on the PGA Tour, and I have with me Will Harvey, Vokey Wedge rep out on the DP World Tour. And this week we are ham and egging it through the 151st Open Championship here at Royal Liverpool. And this golf course is awesome. Big differences though. It's very soft here, so we're seeing a difference in how we normally approach an Open Championship. I know for me, working with guys, we're going with thinner flanges, a little bit less bounce, but not so little that you can't get out of some of the big bunkers. And just guys trying to find those feels of, I can pitch it and I can get out of the bunker. So what are you seeing, Will?
I've had exactly the same. I think generally our guys play a little bit lower bounce than your side. So a lot of the guys have just been going for a little bit more sole width. The bunks are quite soft, powdery, so that's been a few issues at the start of the week, but now we're finding the guys are getting into the slightly wider soles and we're getting the ball up in the air, getting a bit more spin, a bit more control out of the sand.
Yeah, and it's a different week than last week. I know this week, because of the moisture content, the grass is really healthy here. So some of the wispy, fescue styles of rough, it's not quite as thin as it's been in years past, like last year at St. Andrews. This week, there's a lot of grass. So I think when you talk to the players on the range, they would say, this is more than kind of we're used to. And so for most of the guys, I think they're playing the same wedge that they play every single week just because they don't feel like they have to make those changes. But for the guys who came with more bounce than maybe they needed to, we're seeing guys going to T grinds, L grinds, L's with, the heel removed, a lot of A grinds this week. And then, like you said, some of the wider soles like the 6-degree K, and I think we had a couple guys going to a 4-degree K as well. So a lot of cool stuff going on. The bunkering, very unique, like you'd see in links golf. Really tall bunkers. 17's a really cool hole. Had a chance to kind of go down there and check that out a little bit, but the sand is very moist and it's kind of clumpy. And so you're going to hear a lot of guys talk about speed through that sand and how it's important to swing really fast to get that ball to lift up and stop. So, you hear anything this week from anybody?
I've had a few bits pitching wise, so keeping the ball flight down because it's going to be quite windy, but you got to combine that with a slightly softer than usual fairways on links. So I've had a few guys with going a little bit more bounce at the front of the club, but obviously keeping that low bounce and width around the green at the back.
Yeah. So one of the cool questions we get is, what are players using? Clearly we're going with less bounce. This is just kind of one of those places that requires it. But big questions on T versus L and why those two grinds. How do you choose the right one? If you could speak to how you would approach your players on T versus L, what are some of the things you're paying attention to?
So we've got two different sole widths. We've got the T, which is a little bit wider, but there's also a lot of relief off the back of that club, so it makes it super versatile. Whereas with the L grind, we've got slightly more forward sole on there, so it's a little bit wider, which gives you a touch more bounce. So even though they've both got the same bounce number on, they're going to feel very different through the turf. So if you look at the image here, we've got slightly more width in the T, slightly less width in the L, and a completely different forward sole. So very different shape, very different size on that front part, which is going to give you a completely different feel through the ground.
Yeah, I know for us, when you look at the two grinds, you go, they look pretty similar. I mean, how do I know which one's best for me? I know one of the key things that I pay attention to when I'm deciding whether or not you're an L or a T player is, are you an open face wedge user? Do you like to see the wedge sit close to the ground? And if you are, and this golf course would certainly be one of those places where you'd want the wedge to sit really close, the T grind is going to sit closer than the L for sure. So if you're looking for, a low bounce option, but I want one that has more bounce, L's a great option. It's a little taller in the back, and you do get some nice forward bounce for the square face shots. And then if you really want to have max versatility, the T grind is awesome. So we definitely see a lot of those. I know for me, this is the #1 wedge we produce on the PGA Tour.
Yep.
What are you seeing on your tour?
Same this side. From the versatility you can get from there, if you combine that with a nice high bounce sand wedge, where you're going to get best of both worlds. So you've got forgiveness and bounce in the sand wedge for when you get really deep sand or longer bunker shots. You can go into this one to give you that maximum versatility around the green.
So let's talk for a second about changes. Do you have anybody that's made a change this week? Is somebody going into a different grind or a different bounce?
We've had a few guys move around. We've had a little bit of play. Nothing too crazy. Like we say, the conditions are pretty soft, so guys like that familiarity in there, and we've already got a load of T grinds in play from our side. So most guys have stuck with where they are at the moment. Yeah,
I know one of the interesting changes I've seen this week was Justin Thomas. You even saw it last week. Max Homa switched to an A grind. Yeah. That's a super cool option, for guys who are trying to create that lift. A little shallower on the back edge, but Justin Thomas said, hey, I just need to feel more speed, and I'm currently using this tee, but I need to find a wedge that just kind of slides into the ball a little easier. So we took an A and we polished off a ton of the heel, and right away, it's a totally different sound. You don't hear as much ground involvement as the wedge hits, and he gets that feeling and that confidence that he can just kind of do whatever he wants around the green. So those are very common things I'd say this week that we're seeing. For most guys, though, it's, hey, dance with the girl you brought. I'm using the M, I'm using the T, I'm using the L. And I think with the golf course conditions currently, those guys are set up for the different types of shots around the greens with what they brought.